My mother signed my name on my grandfather's will. And then she sat across from me at Thanksgiving dinner and passed the sweet potato casserole like nothing happened. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not the forgery, not the money, the sweet potato casserole. The way she smiled. The way she asked if I wanted more. I didn't know yet. That's the thing. I was sitting there, completely in the dark, cutting a piece of pecan pie, while my entire inheritance had already been redirected into an account I didn't even know existed. By the time I figured it out, and I mean really figured it out, paper trail and all, the probate fraud division of the Travis County DA's office already had a file with our family's name on it. They were already watching, they just needed me to walk through the door. Let me take you back, because none of this makes sense without the before. I grew up in a small town called Buda, Texas, about 20 miles south of Austin. The kind of place where everybody knows your last name and your business before you do. My grandfather, Leonard Whitfield, owned a feed supply store on Route 967 for 41 years. Nothing fancy. A concrete floor, the smell of grain dust and motor oil baked into every wall, a cash register that was probably old when Reagan was president. But it was his. And it was enough. Granddad Leonard was a quiet man. The kind of quiet that wasn't cold. It was earned. He'd lost my grandmother Ruthie to a stroke when I was 9. And after that he just kind of folded inward. He still showed up. He still opened the store. He still called me every Sunday. But some part of him went with her. I was his only grandchild. My mom, her name's Diane, she's his daughter, his only child. And for a long time, I told myself that meant we were all on the same team. That was my flaw. Right there, I kept telling myself we were a team. Here's the thing about Diane. She's not a monster. That would be easier, honestly. Monsters are easy to leave. Diane is something more complicated. She's a woman who always believed she got the short end of everything. Married my dad Richard when she was 22. He drove a dusty white Ford F-150 and worked vac installation. Good man. Not a rich one. She worked the front desk at a dental practice in Kyle for 16 years. And somewhere in all of that, she decided that Leonard's store, and whatever was behind it, was her retirement plan. She never said that out loud to me. But I saw it. The way she'd mention the property taxes on Granddad's land, out of nowhere. The way she'd ask me, super casually, if he'd ever talked to a lawyer. The way she'd frame every visit to his house as being helpful, bringing groceries, fixing the gutters, like she was logging hours. I told myself she was just being a good daughter. I told myself I was being uncharitable. I told myself that for 6 years. I want to ask you something. Have you ever watched someone in your family do something that made your stomach drop, and then convince yourself you were reading it wrong? Tell me in the comments. Because I did that. Over and over. And it cost me. Granddad's health started sliding in the spring of 2021. Nothing dramatic at first. He got winded walking to the back of the store. Started forgetting to eat lunch. My Aunt Carol, Leonard's cousin, the closest thing he had to a sister, called me one Tuesday afternoon and said he'd left the stove on overnight. Not once. 3 times. I drove down to Buda from my apartment in North Austin that weekend. His kitchen smelled like burnt coffee. There was a stack of unopened mail on the counter, mostly bills. A few seed catalogs from companies that had probably been mailing him for 30 years. He sat at the kitchen table in a flannel shirt, even though it was 78 degrees outside, and he said, "I'm fine, Katie Bird. I'm just a little tired." I stayed 3 days. Diane stayed the whole month. I'm not even kidding when I say the shift was so gradual I almost missed it entirely. Diane became Granddad's primary caretaker. On paper, that sounds like a loving thing. And parts of it were. She cooked for him. She drove him to his cardiologist in San Marcos. She sat with him through the long, slow evenings when his TV was too loud and his memories were unreliable. I don't want to take any of that away. I'm telling you the full picture. But somewhere in those months, she also became his gatekeeper. Phone calls I made to Granddad started going to voicemail. When I'd call Diane's cell, she'd answer and tell me he was resting, or he'd just taken his medication and wasn't up for talking. I'd drive down. I made the trip 9 times between August and December of 2021. and she'd be there when I arrived. Always. Like she'd been waiting. The visits started feeling supervised. There was one afternoon in October. I'd brought Granddad a bag of those cinnamon hard candies he loved, the old-fashioned kind from Heb, and I sat with him on the back porch while the cedar trees went golden in the afternoon light. He was having a good day. He asked about my job. I work in contract compliance for a mid-sized logistics firm, and he laughed at something I said about my commute. Real laugh. The kind that crinkled his whole face. Then Diane came out with a glass of sweet tea, sat down without being asked, and the conversation just changed. Granddad got quieter. He kind of checked out, not because he was tired. He'd been fine 5 minutes before. It was something else, a switch I didn't understand yet. I drove home on 35 with that knot in my stomach I'd learned to dismiss. I dismissed it again. Look, I want to be clear about something. Diane didn't see herself as doing anything wrong. I genuinely believe that. In her mind, she'd spent decades being the responsible one, the daughter who stayed close, who showed up, who didn't move to Austin and build a separate life. She'd done the work. She'd earned what was coming. The will was just her correcting an oversight. That's how she thought about it. I'm almost certain. I really want to know. If you found out a family member was managing someone's affairs but keeping you at a distance, what would you do? Would you say something? I second-guess my silence every single day. Drop it in the comments. Granddad Leonard died on a Wednesday in February 2022. It was cold, which is unusual for Central Texas, and the cedar was pollinating, that thick yellow dust coating every car in the county. I found out from Aunt Carol. She called me at 7:14 in the morning. I remember staring at the number on my phone screen for a full 3 rings before I picked up. He'd gone quietly, in his own bed, which is what he'd wanted. I didn't know I'd miss the funeral until 4 days later. Wait. Let me say that again, because it still doesn't sound real. I didn't know I'd miss the funeral until 4 days later. Diane had planned it for the following morning, a small graveside service, she said, the way Leonard would have wanted. She said she'd called me. She said she left a voicemail. She said she was under so much stress that things must have slipped through the cracks. She said this at Thanksgiving, by the way, with the sweet potato casserole, months later, when she finally said it out loud. My phone showed no missed call, no voicemail, nothing. But I sat there with my fork, and I nodded like, maybe she was right. Maybe I deleted it by accident. Maybe I was the one who was confused. That's what gaslighting does, by the way. It doesn't just make you doubt the event. It makes you doubt the version of yourself who experienced it. The will was filed for probate in March. I found out about it the way you find out about a lot of things you should have been told directly, from someone else. Aunt Carol again. She called me on a Tuesday night and said, "Katie, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Did you sign off on the changes to Leonard's will?" I didn't even know there had been changes. I told her I'd signed nothing. She got very quiet on her end of the line. I could hear her television in the background, one of those home renovation shows, the kind with the dramatic before and after music. Then she said, "That's what I thought." Here's what nobody tells you about the moment everything clicks. It's not dramatic. There's no music. You don't flip a table or scream into a pillow. You just get very, very still. I hung up with Aunt Carol, and I sat at my kitchen table in North Austin for probably 40 minutes. The refrigerator hummed. My upstairs neighbor was walking around in what sounded like work boots. A car alarm went off outside, and nobody moved to stop it. I just sat there, turning over the shape of what I was starting to understand. Then I opened my laptop. That's the moment I stopped being the grieving granddaughter and started being the woman who works in contract compliance. I need to explain what that means, because it matters. My whole job, my actual daily 9-to-5 job, is auditing documentation chains. I look for discrepancies. I find the place where a signature doesn't match a date, where a clause was amended without authorization, where someone thought they were being clever and left a trail they didn't know was there. I do this for a logistics company. I do it well. I flagged 3 fraudulent vendor contracts in the last 2 years alone. I just never thought I'd have to do it in my own family. But muscle memory is a strange thing. Once I started, I couldn't stop. The Travis County probate court records are public. That surprised people when I told them later. They assumed this kind of thing was sealed or hard to access. It's not. You pull up the county clerk's online portal, you search by decedent name, and there it is. Leonard Dale Whitfield. Filed March 4th, 2022. I ordered the full document packet, paid the $14.50 processing fee on my debit card. It arrived as a PDF 3 business days later. I printed it out at the FedEx on Burnett Road. 61 pages. The woman behind the counter handed me the stack without looking up. I drove home and spread every page across my kitchen floor, and I started reading. The amendment was on page 37. A codicil, that's the legal term for an amendment to a will, dated November 14th, 2021. 3 months before Granddad died. It redirected 30% of the estate's liquid assets, plus co-ownership of the store's commercial property, from a split between Diane and me to Diane exclusively. The reason cited was, and I'm reading this directly, per the mutual agreement and witness consent of all named beneficiaries. My name was on the witness line. Katherine Anne Whitfield. Signed and dated. I was in Austin on November 14th, 2021. I have a gas station receipt from the Shell on Runberg Lane at 11:47 am, and a Venmo payment to my roommate for our internet bill at 2:15 p.m. I was never in Buda. I never signed anything. That signature was not mine. If you've ever had to become your own investigator inside your own family, you know what this feeling is. That cold, focused place you go to. I want to know if anyone else has been there. Tell me in the comments. I didn't call a lawyer first. I know that's what you're supposed to do, and I'm not recommending my approach. I'm just telling you what I actually did. I made a spreadsheet. Every visit I'd made to Buda between June and December 2021. Timestamped. Cross-referenced with my calendar app, my Google Maps location history, and my credit card statements. Every phone call between me and Diane, pulled from my carrier's account portal going back 18 months. Every text message. I screenshotted everything and backed it up to 2 different cloud accounts and an external hard drive I bought at Best Buy for $42. Then I started on Granddad's records. Aunt Carol had a copy of the original will, the one from 2018. Before any amendments, she'd been his informal record keeper for years, the way older families sometimes have a person who just holds things. She scanned it and emailed it to me from her AOL account at midnight. God bless her. With a subject line that just said, "Here you go, honey." The 2018 will split everything 50-50. Me and Diane. Equal. That's what Granddad wanted. The codicil changed all of that. And I hadn't signed it. But here's the part that made my stomach drop in a completely different way. When I looked up the notary's stamp on the codicil, a notary named R. Castillo out of San Marcos, I ran the license number through the Texas Secretary of State's notary database. Standard practice. Something I do at work without even thinking. R. Castillo's notary commission had expired in August 2021, 3 months before the codicil was supposedly notarized. That's not just a forged signature. That's a fraudulently notarized document. That's a different category of problem entirely. I sat with that for a long moment. The refrigerator hummed. My neighbor's boots crossed the ceiling again. I thought about Diane passing the sweet potato casserole. Then I called an estate attorney. The attorney's name was Marcus Webb. Office on South Congress. The kind of place with framed diplomas and a rubber plant that's seen better days. He reviewed my packet in about 20 minutes, set it down on the desk and said, "Miss Whitfield, someone made a significant error in judgment here." He'd already seen this before. That's the part that hit me. He said probate fraud in Texas was more common than people thought. He said the Travis County DA's office had a dedicated unit, the Probate and Elder Financial Fraud Division, and that cases involving expired notaries and forged beneficiary signatures were exactly what they handled. He made the referral call from his office while I sat across from him. I want to tell you what Diane was doing during this time, because I found out later. She was redecorating. She'd hired a contractor to gut the kitchen in her house in Kyle. New countertops, new cabinets, the kind of renovation that runs $30,000–$40,000. She'd put a down payment on a used travel trailer. She told a neighbor, who told someone who told Aunt Carol, that she was finally going to do right by herself after years of sacrifice. She thought it was over. She thought the money was hers, and the paperwork was filed, and the old man was in the ground, and that was that. That's the thing about hubris. It makes you loud right before everything goes quiet. The investigators contacted me in late April, two of them, a woman named Agent Reyes and a man whose name I was asked not to share publicly. They came to my apartment. I made coffee. We sat at the same kitchen table where I'd done all my spreadsheet work, and I handed them a printed copy of everything I'd compiled. 43 pages. Indexed. Agent Reyes looked at the index page and said, "You work in compliance, don't you?" I said yes. She said, "It shows." They had already been building a case. That's the part I didn't know. Apparently, Granddad wasn't the only elderly property owner in Hayes County whose estate documents had crossed R. Castillo's expired stamp. There were 3 others. 2 of them had died without family members who noticed. One of them had a son in Dallas who noticed, but didn't know what to do about it. My file was the one that filled in the gap they needed. Diane was served on a Thursday morning in June. I know this because Aunt Carol called me from her car, parked across the street, where she'd happened to be visiting a neighbor. She said the investigator's car was in the driveway for 45 minutes. She said when Diane came outside afterward, she stood on the front porch for a long time. Just stood there, not moving. Aunt Carol said it was the most alone she'd ever seen another person look. I know what you're thinking. Did I feel bad? I want to be honest with you. Yes and no. I'll tell you what I actually felt in a second. But first, if this is hitting close to home for you, stick around. Stories like this live in the shadows of families everywhere. That's exactly why I share them. Here's what happened, and I'm going to be straight with you because I think you've earned the straight version. Diane pled no contest to a reduced charge, fraudulent notarization and document forgery, a 3rd-degree felony in Texas. She avoided prison. She was sentenced to 5 years probation, a significant fine, and full restitution of the redirected estate assets. The commercial property reverted to the estate, which was then probated correctly. My share was restored. The contractor got paid. The travel trailer went back to the lot. The kitchen renovations stayed, half finished. Last I heard. I don't talk to Diane anymore. I want to be precise about that. It's not that I haven't tried. It's that the version of her I'd need her to be, the one who could sit across from me and say I knew what I was doing and I'm sorry, that person hasn't shown up. What showed up instead was a letter through her attorney that said she'd acted out of financial desperation and a misguided sense of entitlement to her father's legacy. Her attorney wrote that. Not her. She didn't write a single word of it. That told me everything. What I carry now isn't the anger. The anger burned out somewhere around month 4 of the legal process. It runs out of fuel eventually. And what's left is just this low, persistent sadness. A kind of grief I didn't expect. Not for the money. For the version of my family I'd been protecting in my head for years. The one where we were all on the same team. I still drive through Buda sometimes. The feed store is leased to a landscaping company now. They painted over the sign. But the concrete floor is still the same floor, and sometimes I park in the lot, and I just sit there for a minute. I think about Granddad Leonard sitting at his kitchen table in that flannel shirt, telling me he was just a little tired. I think about the stack of unopened mail, the seed catalogs. I think about what he knew and what he didn't know, and whether in those last months he was afraid. I'll never have the answer to that last one. And I think that's the part I'll carry longest. Here's the question I want to leave you with, and I mean it genuinely, because I think about it more than I probably should. If you found out someone in your family had done this, and you had the power to stop them, would you? Even knowing what it costs? Even knowing the version of that relationship you'd have to bury along with everything else? I don't have a clean answer. I just know what I did. Leave me your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Stories like this don't end with a bow on them. They end with a probate filing in a half-renovated kitchen and a woman standing alone on her front porch. They end with a granddaughter sitting in a parking lot in Buda, Texas, listening to the wind move through cedar trees. They end with you learning, maybe too late, that loyalty isn't the same thing as safety. But they do end. And And that's something